Thank you, and congratulations to all of you. I thought I'd start with Ira, and maybe Rebecca and Ben as well. If you could just tell us if you remember how and when you discovered Peter Hujar and his work.
Matthew Marks Gallery, early 90s. Started seeing Peter's work and have really felt close to it and interested in it and curious. And also, I continue to discover new things about his work all the time, yesterday. So it's very alive for me. And he was a photographer who was taking pictures that were both beautiful and also about things that I hadn't seen that meant a lot to me. The subjects of his work were also very important to me. I just want to thank Jordan Weissman and Francis Schichtel, who published this great book by Linda. They discovered the transcript, were told about the transcript at the Morgan Library, and they said this should be a book. So they're really responsible for the fact that this day is still with us. So thank you.
Ben and Rebecca, I'm curious to hear about your relationship to Hujar's work. Somebody you knew before you made the film.
Yeah, I think the first time I ever actually saw one was on the cover of that brilliant album by Anoni, Anthony and the Johnsons at the time. I'm a Bird Now, I think that's what it's called. Yeah, I think that was the first time I ever saw one. But then I realized that I actually I think it was years then passed before I realized who that guy was who took that photo, and then I realized I knew lots of other images of his, and then this is decades ago, and yeah, I realized I was sort of low level obsessed with him, and then I bought one. I bought maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. I have now a Hujar, and it's a self-portrait of him naked in a chair, and I think it's called something like Depressed. Depressed, winter 1980, and it's on the left as you go into my flat, and I sort of talk to him. He looks rather stern in the photo, but I feel like he sort of communicates with me somehow. Yeah.
Rebecca.
Yeah, that's a good story. I don't have a good story. I think I also noticed on the front of that album cover, I think that might have been the first one I ever was aware of. And then, embarrassingly, it was more, I was aware of other artists of that period, obviously, Maple, all these people. And then, Hujar started becoming in everyone's consciousness about, 5 or 6 years ago. And that's really when I started to pay attention and look. And then I was really struck and immediately became very interested. So when this came up, I already knew of him and was very excited about that.
Linda, I'm very glad you're here with us today. Could you tell us a bit more about this project and how it came to be, and the idea of recording the daily lives of artists?
Well, I had been working with tapes before. I wrote a book called Talk, which was 3 people talking, and wanted to continue that kind of practice. And the idea came to me of asking people to write down what they did on a day that they would choose themselves, and then meet with me the next day. And I did, the first 2 was Peter and Chuck Close. And then I started doing people who weren't known at all and who actually weren't that interesting. So I eventually gave up on the it'd be hard to beat Peter and Chuck, actually. So it never developed into a book. But I always had the transcripts, and I gave the Peter one to the Morgan, and that really moved things along, I think.
Ira, could you say a bit about your encounter with this transcript? Did it strike you immediately as a film?
I was working with Ben on Passages, a film we made together in Paris, and I saw the book at a gay bookstore in Paris, and I bought it and I read it over. Actually, it wasn't at one point. I read it over a couple of weekends. It's very short, but it took me a little while. And really on the last page, I thought, I read this description of Peter at the window listening to the sex workers, and I was like, I just was there. It was so vivid, and I was very emotionally connected, and I immediately thought I should make this as a film with Ben Whishaw. Like, it was all one thing, and if it wasn't Ben Whishaw, it wouldn't be. Like, I wouldn't have made it. It was really about us continuing a work we had done in Passages, we were doing in Passages. And so then I reached out to Linda. I DM'd her on Instagram. And I would say maybe 14 months later, we were making a movie with Rebecca Hall at Westbeth, who very gratefully donated space because we mission aligned with that great building that's been around since '71 for artists in New York City. And we moved in there, and we had a kind of playground of this imagined version of Linda's apartment.
Could you say a bit about, I guess, turning this text into scenes, really? I mean, I think that's, in some ways, a quite simple film, but also I think a lot of complexity involved in how it becomes a film. Yeah.
The hardest part of the film was understanding what to do with the opportunity I had to make it. It came together quite quickly financially. Thank you, Jordan, and everyone who's involved in making that true. And then I had these great actors, and I had the space, and then I went with my cinematographer, Alex Ash, and we went to the space, and I thought this would be in real time. I thought that these actors would play out this 1.5 hours, and I got there, and I had these great stand-ins, and I started to think about how to block this material, and it was immediately like one of the worst nightmares of my creative life, because I was like, well, what do they do? Like, in real life, I think they sat across a kitchen table and they didn't move, and I like to make what I consider action films. So this was not gonna work. And so it took about maybe 4 or 5 weeks of a lot of middle of the night worries. My husband, Boris Torres, who's here, being very patient with waking him up most nights because I just couldn't figure out what to do with this material. And then it was really specifically a film by Jim McBride called My Girlfriend's Wedding, which I really recommend, which was the beginning of unlocking a possibility which had to do with ellipses, and that spaces, particularly in a kind of personal cinema, didn't need to be arrived at in traditional narrative form, but could be a jump cut between here and there and here and there. And then with Alex and these stand-ins, we went back to the space and photographed at different times of the day over a couple of weeks. And suddenly I had these images that were they were a kind of reverie of cinematic images that were interesting to me. And I had them in my notes app, and I was looking at them, and I was like, oh, that's the movie. So it was a series of images that were focused on form, space, light, and time that became a narrative.
I'd love to hear Ben and Rebecca talk about just their approach to playing real people, but not exactly in the context of a typical biographical film. I mean, you're asked to embody these two people at this very specific moment in time, and I'm just wondering how you approach that as actors. I mean, Rebecca, you have Linda as a reference, and Ben, I'm curious how you both worked with this.
Yeah, well, I did have a reference, but at the same time, I suppose I didn't. I suppose, you know, at a certain point, you've just got to play the scene and let go of a sort of sense of I'm playing a real person. Not that I don't respect the person sitting here to my right, but it's like I tried to absorb as much of, I guess, your essence as I could from phone calls. We had some lovely phone calls. I feel I didn't ask enough questions because you're really good at asking questions. So you immediately started asking me questions about, you know, the name of my daughter and why I named her that way, and like, what did I think about that? And, and I kept trying to, you know, jujitsu it back into a.
Oh, I did that.
Yeah, you did, but I, you're artful at it, obviously. But I instantly loved Linda, so that was helped because I feel that there's a kind of warmth to, I can't say her, you as a person, that radiates and care, and I think that I just wanted to try and find a way into that as much as possible.
And you did, yeah.
Ben?
Well, there is no video of Peter Hujar, nothing. But Ira found some tape of him. Actually, you found stuff that I didn't really listen. There's a whole tape of him trying to give up smoking and being hypnotized and stuff.
He hypnotizes himself, and it's an audio tape, which is pretty fun.
But I didn't ever seem to get that tape. Anyway,
I have it still.
okay. But there was another one that was an interview. David Wojnarowicz was interviewing Peter Hujar, and this was quite an extended tape of him talking. So I had that, and that was very nice to listen to. But again, a bit like Rebecca, at a certain point, you have to just play the scene and play what is really going on between us. And also, Ira doesn't really like you to be a character as such, wouldn't you say? Like, you don't really want someone, it's a hard thing to describe, but you don't want it to be a performance, or you want
it to be performed, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would say something interesting is, for me, this is the first time I've ever worked with actors where I asked them to change their accent. I've never done that. So I generally ask actors to arrive, memorize their lines, put on costumes, and move. And here there was a real transformation, which I actually found very interesting. It ultimately became freeing for me because it became about performance also. But I think that is very almost invisible in the work you both do. But we also, I made one choice, which was to follow something I do strategically in my work, which is I don't rehearse, which was very interesting for Ben, who had a massive amount of material, to do that in private, which is sort of what Peter, I think the privacy of Ben's work to me mirrors the privacy of Peter's work that Peter reveals in the film. All the kind of spinning, and I feel like I don't really know as much about what you feel about the creative act of getting to the point in which you were ready to make that live.
It just took months to learn it, like kind of. And I showed it. I mean, it was really quite difficult to learn, and I had to learn it all because we weren't filming in sequence. So, yeah, I had to learn it kind of like it was for a play. And I showed it to a friend who's a musician, and I said, "Look at this thing. How am I gonna?" And she said, "That's really hard. That's like me trying to learn someone else's improvisation." So yeah, it's interesting. But it was really beautiful as well to have time with someone's words and all of their strange. Because how people actually speak is so fascinating, don't you think? And very rarely actually explored in cinema, like the strange, like the articulacy, but also the inarticulacy of things, and just how we actually speak. It became very fascinating to me as I was learning it. Yeah.
Linda, I'd love to hear you just say a bit about what was your reaction to seeing this film?
Well, I've seen it 3 times now, and each time I like it even more. Just seeing Rebecca playing Linda Rosenkrantz is quite a trip. And it brings back my feelings for Peter very strongly. The intimacy of it, the love that I had for him. So it's very moving to me each time. I mean, I think Ira did an incredible, miraculous job taking those transcripts and making this kind of a film.
We have time for only one more question, and I thought I'd come back to something you said in the introduction, Ira, and maybe the others can weigh in too. You said that the film speaks to what we've lost, but also what we have. I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that idea.
I was affected by hearing that back, so it must be meaningful. Yeah, I mean, I guess the film draws attention to the moment, which I think is what cinema can do. So it's like the only thing I want in cinema is to capture the moment, and to capture, as part of the word, is a recognition that it won't last, like it's over. So I think that combination is something that's quite exquisite when it happens in a certain way, and I think the film, like, there is a lot from that period that I would want in my own life, including the community and the sustained nature of intimate interactions. And I keep missing the Cedar Tavern. Like, I want a place where people gather as artists, and I guess we're gathering here. So I think there's some loss of wishing for that, but also there was an intimacy in the making of the film, and there's an intimacy in the friendship that I feel like is familiar to me also in my life. Like, I have intimacy. So I guess the film records something that I love.
Would any of you like to add to that? I think that was a good note to end on. So I want to thank all of you, and congratulations on the film.